there, my name is Benedetta and welcome to 10 Days to Read. Today's video is all about the hot takes. I will be sharing 5 classic books that I don't like. I'm always a great advocate for reading classics. It is what I read and what I genuinely love, but I can't deny the fact that of course every once in a while I find one that leaves me disappointed. So today I just want to share my opinions on some of the classics I think that you really shouldn't waste your time on. These of course are going to be my opinions. Clearly classic books, by virtue of being part of the canon, have some degree of importance, of influence. That is absolutely and objectively something that they will always have. But on the subjective side, that doesn't mean that you're gonna necessarily love them, and this is what I think about these books. As much as I respect what they've done for literature in general, I just didn't get anything from the experience of reading them, and so I just wanted to put it out there, and I hope that this doesn't spring excessive negativity. If you disagree with my opinions, please let me know in the comments, but of course remember to be respectful and nice, and let me know as well if you have any classics that have disappointed you. So without further ado, these are some of the classics that I simply just wouldn't recommend. So the number one book here is Lord of the Flies by William Golding, which is a book that I've actually recently decluttered because I just couldn't see myself going back to it and wanting it in my collection in general, so I decided to rehome it to somebody who I'm sure will appreciate it more than I did. So this is the story of a group of schoolboys who get stranded on a desert island. They sort of have to fend for themselves and essentially revert to being completely feral, and it ends up in tragedy, as you may or may not expect. This is sort of a study on human nature. It is set in World War II, so it wants to be a bit of a metaphor, but I think that in general I can't go past the fact that things get so tragic and wild, and I simply can't buy the fact that that is what would actually happen if a bunch of kids from age 6 to like 12 would get stranded on an island. I actually looked into it when I read it, and it turns out this book is a sort of a response to other books that have the same premise, and the idea is that in those, like Coral Island for example, things turn out really positively and the kids are able to self-govern themselves, perhaps in a way that is too mature for their age. But at the same time, I just feel like this Lord of the Flies was an extreme exaggeration. It is just sort of almost like a horror story, or at least it does have horror elements that really took me aback, and I did not appreciate them whatsoever. And I mean, I can see it. Kids can be somewhat scary. The idea of leaving 40 kids to their own resources, you know, with bullying, weird age dynamics. Of course, like, that is not a recipe for harmony necessarily, but at the same time, the level of disaster portrayed in this book is a bit too much, or at least for me, it wasn't something that was enjoyable to read whatsoever. Perhaps it's just me not understanding the moral of the story. Perhaps it's just me being a bit of a softie in that sense. I accept that. I'm not saying once again that I am completely right on this one, and I'm sure that somebody can appreciate this, but I also will say that I did not like the writing style. I didn't find it conducive to a true connection to the story for me. I felt like some things were a little bit confusing in the way they were written, and I don't know, maybe I'm stupid, I don't know. I just didn't like this book at all. The second book I have here is Hard Times by Charles Dickens. Oh boy, I don't even know where to start with Charles Dickens as an author. I just keep trying and trying, and I am not won over by this author. I don't know if I ever will be, and I just feel like I need to accept it sooner rather than later. Don't get me wrong, A Christmas Carol is a holiday masterpiece, and that's something worth revisiting every year, sure, but his signature coming-of-age stories set in the Industrial Revolution, Victorian England, they just don't do it for me. Hard Times, I think, is the biggest culprit of this. I read it with my friends as a buddy read, and none of us liked it. If you asked me the plot, I couldn't tell you. I even read the back here, and it's saying nothing, like, I swear. This book has so little substance, it's not even funny. I feel like the story happens, but it just keeps introducing bits and characters that just end up building up to something up until the very last section of the book. And in the last section, I just don't feel like the resolution is satisfactory because I've been bored so far by all of this this build up to just be resolved in the last few chapters. I think that in this book in particular, I found it hard to connect to the setting. I found it really bleak. Of course, again, this is one of the things that Charles Dickens always does in his books because of the setting. But I just feel like as well, some of the others like Great Expectations or David Copperfield that I've read before have more of a rags to riches situation going on. This doesn't even have that, truly. So I don't know, I just really can't connect with any of them. I might give Dickens one last shot. I might read A Tale of Two Cities. If you've read it, let me know if you had more success with that one compared to Great Expectations, which I also didn't like, and Hard Times, and David Copperfield. I won't bother with Oliver Twist because I know the story and I already know that I don't love it. If you think that there is a novel by Dickens that breaks the mold and I might appreciate, feel free to let me know, please. So the third book is another one that I got rid of recently, and it's Lady Chatterley's Lover. So this is a banned book, no less. I was really excited to read it because of, you know, its controversial nature. I mean, sounds like a blast from our point of view, but turns out it was just a bit of a letdown for me. This is a story of a lady, like an English sort of noblewoman, whose husband is paraplegic. And so he sort of spurs her to have an affair in order to provide him with an heir. This premise already, so much to unpack. But the problem and the plot really is the fact that she gets entangled with a groundskeeper at their estate. So therefore a man far below her station. So this creates the internal conflict that the character has to fight against and sort of puts them as star-crossed lovers. Except in my opinion, the lover part is just widely overstated in the sense that, yes, of course, he entertains her, they have loads of sex and stuff, but at the end of the day, they don't seem to really click. They sort of argue all the time, if anything. I just don't see this as some grand love story. It's definitely something that has something to say about women's liberation, sure, societal differences and keeping the social classes segregated. I understand what it's trying to do from that point of view, perhaps. But I just feel like the plot itself, for me, was just not really enjoyable to read. I found the lover to be an extremely dislikable character, and I understand that that may be by design, for sure. I just feel like I'm not the type of person who enjoys unlikable characters a whole lot. Especially because, unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the stuff that he says has just not aged well. He becomes the mouthpiece for some statements that are misogynistic or homophobic or racist, and there's a passage in particular that really just, I can't let go of how offensive I found it. The point is that that was offensive back in the day as well, and right now it's offensive in a different way. But this is not some woke type of take on my part. Even though they were not meant to be relatable, I still hated the fact that this was our romantic lead. I just found this so uncomfortable to read. I don't know, controversial, but not in the way that I would like it. Okay, so this is probably the most controversial take in this video because this book is extremely widely beloved. So I apologize in advance and I hope that I don't offend you. The point is that I just really did not enjoy Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This book is about Tess, who is, as the subtitle will read, a pure woman who becomes the victim of her circumstances throughout her life. The problem with this book is that she keeps encountering horrible people left and right. Her parents are drunken, ignorant. She gets abused by men taking advantage of her. And then worst of all, of course, is Angel, who is supposed to be the romantic lead, if you will, and who essentially repudiates her after finding out about her past, which again she has no responsibility over. She's entirely the victim throughout her entire story. The thing is, I feel bad for Tess. So there is an element of that, which I will explore later, so put a pin in it. But at the same time, I also think she is extremely passive in this story, which is something that I really didn't like. I'm not saying she should have girl bossed harder or anything. I just feel like the way she's put through this extreme amount of trauma porn feels cruel. That takes me to the previous point, which is I sort of don't like what the author has done with this. I understand once again that this is a tale of hardship that was needed at the time, but I think it's just the amount of events happening to this poor young woman are just absolutely heartbreaking and so difficult to read for me. I am not one who appreciates books that indulge in this amount amount of tragedy. I mean, I've not read it, but this sort of reminded me of what I've heard of A Little Life, you know, that popular book. And that is the reason I don't want to read it. I will say about Tess, at the end of the day, I think that Thomas Hardy is an extremely gifted author. The way he writes is beautiful, poetic. The settings are gorgeous. I've actually recently been to Stonehenge, and I don't know, it was just so beautiful to see that area. The fictional Wessex is just a beautiful part of England. So of course, the way he describes it is just stunning. At the end of the day, obviously, I know how influential and important Tess was as a book when it first came out. It's just a pity that I don't like it, and I'm sure that this is my most unpopular opinion about classics ever, and I'm sorry to say that that's the case, but as it stands, unfortunately, Tess of the D'Urbervilles is a book I don't enjoy. And finally, my last book for today is White Fang by Jack London. So I read both White Fang and Call of the Wild sort of back to back, and yeah, I just honestly was traumatized. I'd actually started reading White Fang when I was a child, and I just couldn't finish it, and I never DNF books. And now that I read it recently, like as an adult, my opinion has not changed, and in fact, I gave it 1 star, which is a rare rating for me to give, but I just despise this book. The idea is that this book is narrated sort of through the eyes of this wolf who becomes a stray dog at the western frontier of the North American continent. There's not much of a plot to it except his being sort of domesticated or something. I don't know, it's just the sheer amount of animal cruelty in this book is just so off-putting to me. I'm not even that big of an animal lover, and I can stand it, so I don't know who this book is for, because I feel like if you really love animals, you'll just be depressed the whole time. On top of that, I just feel like that point of view just never made for a particularly enthralling or entertaining narrative. I do believe that there is some metaphor for socialism that can be found within the book. Personally, I don't know, if it was a metaphor, it was too sophisticated for me, so it's me again, I'm the problem here, but nevertheless, my reading experience was certainly not made any better by the presence of any subtext, because the text itself was just so off-putting. The other issue that I really disliked was the fact that from the perspective of the wolf, humans are seen as gods, and this gets repeated a lot, and you know, okay, fair enough, that's one perspective to take, but what I really disliked was the fact that there was a juxtaposition between white men in the story who were sort of depicted as the superior gods, and then others like the indigenous characters that of course are hard done by the white men. It's a really sad chapter of history, honestly, and the fact that the wolf sort of refers to the white men as these like massive gods amongst gods, while the native people are sort of belittled. I don't doubt the accuracy of the story, but at the same time, as a book that you would read, I mean, it's just extremely sad and not entertaining, and I don't know, I feel like there's a better story that could have been written in there, which didn't take the perspective of a dog that would then get mistreated. So I mean, I'm sorry if you really enjoyed this book, feel free to change my mind and defend it in the comments, but for me it was just too much. So okay, so thank you so much for watching. I hope that these opinions weren't too upsetting to you or anything. Again, I mean no offense. I certainly know that these are unpopular opinions, and I obviously respect anybody's taste. This is so subjective. I cannot stress that enough. But also let me know if there's any classic books that you absolutely despise, despite everybody else in the world seemingly liking them. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would consider liking it and subscribing to the channel, and let me know if you want to see more lists of classics that I enjoy or don't enjoy. So that was all. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you next time. Bye!